Jeff and I got elected co-chairs of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Drug Policy Reform in September 2017, and working with him and his colleagues over the last 3 or so years has been a huge pleasure, as it has been discovering all the incredibly good people who are working in this space to try and deliver intelligent, evidence-based reform. Now, there is so much of our drugs policy that is in a very poor place from any kind of design where you're actually trying to reduce public harm as a consequence of your policy. It rests on foundations that are, frankly, racist at best, but as to the construction of which drugs were banned in the most restricted categories arising out of the 1961 UN Convention, which is where the United States led the world. And we've seen horrendous changes in administration of drugs policy in the UK, as the old British system, regarded as a great success in the 1960s, then abandoned from the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act onwards. And we saw 1,049 heroin addicts explode to 350,000 over the course of the next 20 years. There are some awful, awful consequences of us not having done drugs policy on a probably evidenced basis. And I don't want to reprise all the great things Jeff said. The wonderful thing about being in this space, we agree on a vast amount of it. The Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group Limited, which is the group I lead, is set up slightly differently from Jeff's. Jeff's is an organisation within the Labour Party trying to win, if you like, obviously support for the Labour Party because they're going to have intelligent drug policy that's going to appeal to the electorate. My organisation doesn't seek the electoral return of the Conservative Party. It seeks to change the drugs policy of the Conservative Party and to open up an evidence-based debate on the centre-right to ask these rather profound questions about the purpose of our policy. And we heard in this area the encouraging signs about the statements from Alok Sharma about our science budget and our research budget and support there. Is this going to apply in the field of pharmaceuticals across the piece? And I increasingly see now government beginning the first stumbling stages of actually trying to bring regulation together here in a rather more intelligent way than it's been done before. Now, I'm very pleased that on medicine from cannabis, the Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group published a review of where we sit now in the regulation of people trying to obtain medicines from cannabis. And on the basis of that review, we've just called for evidence to actually identify what is the regulatory structure that we would need. But alongside that, we've been working on the medicinal use of psilocybin and tackling head-on this central problem, which drug science is going to give us real authority as we work together in doing this, as to what are the obstacles to actually getting Guy Murray, Keith Abraham, and 2,500 other veterans who have PTSD that is beyond the reach of conventional therapy following pretty recent military service. Now, I'm delighted with the work that Heroic Hearts has done. Now, I can claim to be a veteran. If I'm strictly honest, I joined in 1979 and managed to slide out of the army in 1990 before things got too hairy. So there's a certain amount of trauma you get from a cricket ball in the mouth or a cricket ball in the eye. But I have not faced anything of the kind of challenge that Guy and Keith and many of my successors in the army did, of a peacetime army going into the kind of conditions that they were then found in Afghanistan. Extraordinary heroism required for the scale of endurance that was required there from a country at peace. And therefore the encompassing trauma is perhaps on a magnified scale. But the debt we owe those people is limitless as a country, whatever we think of the merits of the military operation that they did. Our servicemen signed a blank check on their lives and on their mental and physical health when they signed up. And if we have the ability to reduce the sum at which that check is cashed in regards to people's mental health, and it is an obvious area of improvement, then we must do it. And so the moral case that is made for engaging in the research into psilocybin and the other psychedelics, as we've heard about their extraordinary potential to work in this area, is a blinding glimpse of the obvious. And I would hope that we are going to make early progress in getting the right rescheduling to enable our policy and our regulations to be enabling that research, not acting as a barrier to it. And if you've got the substance on which you're seeking to do research in the most restricted category of all, one can only just ask oneself the difficulty, challenge, A, of handling it under the regulations that are required to manage that kind of research, but this has got to get paid for, and the reputational issues associated with drugs that are put in those kind of schedules don't exactly have a positive effect on those people who are going to produce the funds to undertake the research in these areas. But now it's clear that the scale of research and the scale of possibility that can be released by it ought to be simply off the scale. The truth is, we're not just talking about 2,500 British veterans with untreatable PTSD. We're talking about people with depression, millions of people in that category. The potential here is absolutely enormous. And my profession simply has to sort itself out in terms of getting a decent regulatory structure to support the research, to make sure the government's objectives about which remain around prohibition of the use of narcotic drugs, and that's a separate debate for another day. But that's the government policy, but the policy has got to serve to deliver the objective. And right now, the objective of delivering research to deliver very great medical benefit, actually whether it's from cannabis-based medicines or whether it's from psychedelics, we've given ourselves a 50-year handicap because of the way we have regulated and legislated here. It's time to address that. And I think that is happening. And as someone said, good ideas have many fathers, which is why we're seeing progress, I think, in very many areas. And as Ronald Reagan said, there is no limit to the amount of good you can do if you don't care who gets the credit. And I think it's very important that we try and get government ministers to own the progress here and to own the arguments around improving the lives of our veterans to whom we owe so much, and improving Britain's place as a base of science and research, particularly in the life science areas, where we have so much to contribute.